G'day mates, ever heard the one about the Aussie who walked into a bar? Yeah, me neither, because we're too busy protesting, right? Well, that's the picture the media paints. But let's set the record straight, shall we? Contrary to the headlines, Australia isn't all about Invasion Day protests, Free Palestine rallies, or environmental demonstrations. Now, don't get me wrong, we Aussies are a passionate lot. We love a good debate over a cold one, but let's be honest, most of us are too busy grilling snags on the barbie or cheering on the footy to be constantly protesting. You see, the news you're fed, the images you see, they're not the whole story. The folks you see stirring up trouble are usually the same bunch of larrikins, looking for any excuse to create a ruckus. They're the minority, not the majority. This isn't to say we don't have our issues, or that we don't care about the world. But the majority of Australians, we didn't vote for a two-race system. We're not buying into the Free Palestine narrative. And while we're concerned about the environment, we're not losing sleep over the thousands of nuclear tests or the global pollution. We're a down-to-earth bunch. We're more likely to be bothered by a police officer threatening a bloke for displaying the Australian flag than by some far-off nuclear test. Mess with our flag, and you're more likely to stir up a hornet's nest than if you stuck your tongue in a fire ant's nest for a taste of honey. And as for the world's problems, well, we care as much about Free Palestine as we do about putting out the bins for garbage collection. We're not heartless, but we're not easily swayed by the media's sensationalism either. So, next time you see a mob protesting on your TV and the commentator says, "This is Australia," remember, that's just a bunch of repeat offender Sheilas and Bruces stirring up a storm in a teacup. Remember the policeman who threatened a bloke for flying the Aussie flag? That's like poking a kangaroo with a stick. You're going to get a kick. Now let's dive into this incident which stirred up more buzz than a bee's nest in summer. Picture this. A regular Aussie, proud of his heritage, his country, decides to display the national flag. But a police officer decides this might incite a riot. A riot, mates, over the display of our own flag. Now if that doesn't ring as strange as a kangaroo in Antarctica, I don't know what does. This incident didn't just ruffle a few feathers, it stirred up the Aussie spirit like a cyclone in the outback. Australians aren't ones to take such threats lying down. We're as resilient as the gum trees that dot our landscapes, and just as stubborn too. Threatening an Aussie for showing their national pride is akin to sticking your tongue into a fire ant's nest because you fancy a taste of honey. It's not going to end well, mate. Australians are a proud, strong lot. We've weathered storms, fires, floods, and we always bounce back, stronger than before. We don't take kindly to being told we can't express our pride in our nation. So if you think about threatening an Aussie for showing their pride, just remember, you might end up with a face full of fire ants. You know what's as welcome in Australia as a rattlesnake in a lucky dip? Treason, that's what. Now I know what you're thinking. Treason? Really? But let's have a chinwag about this. You see, when these protests kick up a ruckus, when they cause fear and unrest, they're not just shaking the tree to see what falls. They're shaking the very core of our nation, our values, our peace. And to many an Aussie, that's as good as treason against the crown. Now don't get me wrong, we respect the right to a fair go, the right to be heard. But causing a hullabaloo, frightening the good folks just trying to live their lives, that's crossing a line. It's like putting a croc in a swimming pool and wondering why everyone's running for the hills. And here's the kicker. Our government and police, they're acting like a bunch of kangaroos caught in the headlights, too scared to address the real issue. Instead of tackling the problem, they're attacking the honest bloke who's done nothing wrong. It's like blaming the Barbie for the burnt snag, when it's the bloke turning the tongs who's at fault. So to those who think it's all fun and games to protest and cause chaos, remember, in the land of kangaroos and koalas, treason is as welcome as a snake in your boot. Scene script. Ever tried to get an Aussie to back down? That's like trying to barbecue a shrimp with a candle. Now let's talk about the Muslim issue in Australia. It's a narrative that's been twisted and turned more times than a kangaroo on a trampoline. But let's set the record straight. Most of the Muslims in Australia, and we're talking about 90% here, are as true blue as the rest of us. They're our mates, our colleagues, our neighbours. They're part of the fabric that makes Australia, well, Australia. But like with any group, there's always a small minority that cause a bit of a stir. And unfortunately, these are the ones that seem to hog the limelight. They're the ones that get the airtime, the ones that make the headlines. And it's not fair. Not to the majority of Muslims who are just trying to live their lives in peace, and not to the rest of us Aussies who know that these troublemakers are not representative of the whole. It's these agitators, these rabble-rousers that are causing concern. And it's a valid concern, one that we should be aware of. But it's also one that we shouldn't let cloud our judgment or make us forget the bigger picture. Because the bigger picture is this: we're all Aussies, regardless of our religion or background, and we're all in this together. Now, there's something you need to understand about Australians. We're a laid-back bunch, sure. We like our footy, our Barbies, our cold ones at the end of a long day, but threaten our peace, our way of life, and you'll see a different side of us. We're resilient, we're resolute, we're as tough as a pair of old boots, and we won't stand for anyone causing trouble on our turf. So, to anyone who thinks they can mess with our mates, Muslim or otherwise, remember, you might just wake up the Aussie giant, and trust me, we're not as cuddly as our koalas when we're riled up. You know what happens when you poke the Aussie bear too much. You get the claws. Lately, we've seen a backlash against all this protest malarkey. Little groups popping up claiming to be neo-Nazis. They're just misguided youngsters trying to mimic the protesters. But it's a dangerous game, this wishing for something without thinking it through. So remember, careful what you wish for, because in Australia, you might just get it, and more. We ask for rain, we get floods. We ask for sun, we get a drought. So don't mess with Aussies, or you might just get more than you bargained for.